Let's bring in a better mind to help us understand Professor Somadoda Fikeni, who is a political historian. Sir, thank you very much indeed for your time. Welcome to the agenda.
Thank you for inviting me, and greetings to your viewers.
Some criticize him for perpetuating apartheid, others for ending it. Your take?
Well, I do think that he is a complex figure who is also having an embedded contradiction given his context. He is a bit of both. He could read the signs of time and the fact that global and international, which had used South Africa as a bulwark against the East Bloc, was no longer a factor in the West. Therefore, that in itself, I think, drifted him into reading the situation well. During the negotiations, he tried to retain as much as he could in terms of the group rights, which was a code name of trying to say we still want the identity to be a factor. And therefore, he should be credited for reading the signs well, but not necessarily as the transformer, because up to the last moment, he missed many opportunities to come clean in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He missed the opportunity recently to define apartheid for what the world saw it to be, a crime against humanity.
Let's take a few steps back and talk about those signs that you mentioned. As he rose through the ranks of the National Party earlier in his career, was there any hint of revolutionary?
No, in fact, he was one of the most conservative members of the Nationalist Party, which was the champion of apartheid. As a member of parliament, as well as a minister, it was only when it became very clear that the isolation of South Africa, the decline of the economy, and the mass mobilization had made the situation untenable. Even the state of emergency was no longer holding back. Only then that he realized that he had to cross the Rubicon that P.W. Botha could not cross in 1985. So we would say he's a latter-day convert in understanding that apartheid was no longer workable, even though it is not convincing that he ever changed. And more controversially, that the message where he is unconditionally apologizing comes after his death. That in itself, I think, will be debated as an issue in terms of timing.
Which led, as president in February 1990, he said that a government has taken a firm decision to release Mr. Mandela unconditionally. That's what his words. In an interview, I was listening to an interview, he said that he came to the realization that he could not build the security of his people on the basis of injustice towards the majority of all the people. How, sir, has he been seen by, as he put it, my people, after that decision to release Nelson Mandela?
Well, the Afrikaner community was already divided, as you had the reformers and those who were still conservative, the Verlichters and the Vergramtes. And this had been the case even by early 80s. And he, therefore, would be seen by some as a person who is a traitor who betrayed the Afrikaner cause, especially by the diehards, and a person who conceded many things, especially by the diehards, by others, including the Afrikaner business, which went to Lusaka, went around the world to disassociate themselves with apartheid, because they realized that their businesses could no longer grow, instead they were shrinking. And therefore, some of them see him as having saved them, and even in the negotiated concessions, they would see him as that person who saved them and also lifted the stigma of being a pariah in the world. So there is a contradiction again among his people who are divided on his legacy.
of South Africa's negotiated democratic transition. Take us back, sir. How real was that threat of civil war back then?
The threat as a participant and an observer was quite real, because the level of mobilization internally in the country had reached levels never seen before in terms of the mass democratic movement. And therefore, you had a situation where even the army could no longer suppress the people. And many organizations which were unbanned in 1990 were effectively already unbanned by the people who were brandishing their flags and, their regalias and so forth, even before this was lifted. So things had become untenable. We could have just seen a civil war because the apartheid regime was still armed enough. But some people do mention even things like nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons never work against your people. And we have seen even mightier regimes before. Once the people turn against, nothing can stop that. Of course, the international community had now started to focus on this situation of isolating South Africa, including Western countries where leaders were quite reluctant, but the people on the ground were swelling in their numbers to demand change.
We are debating his legacy here in South Africa. You mentioned the international community. He shared a Nobel Prize with Nelson Mandela. How do you think he's seen abroad?
Well, I do think that even the world around, they see him as a person who was pragmatic. He may not have had the conviction to see apartheid as being morally wrong for the most part, but that he was pragmatic to think of compromises, to think of making concessions. I think globally that in itself has won him some respect. In fact, many countries like the ones in the Balkan regions, Northern Ireland, the Palestine-Israeli situation and so forth, looked at the South African situation as a model of a homegrown compromise situation. Of course, it's a model that is still under review. It's a model that was not sustained in many ways had we remained true to the promises of that initial transition. It is quite conceivable that we could have taken a different trajectory.
Sir, we thank you very much indeed for coming on. No doubt we will be continuing to have these conversations to figure out where South Africa lies when they think about the legacy that is left behind by FW de Klerk. Professor Somadoda Fikeni, thank you.